Welcome to BeFM Drama, where we turn great works of English literature into gripping radio. I'm your host, Joshua Cornwell, and on today's episode we're bringing you part 3 in our 5-part adaptation of The Missing Three-Quarter, a classic Sherlock Holmes mystery from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. The great detective Sherlock Holmes has been hired by Mr. Cyril Overton of Trinity College, Cambridge, to find Godfrey Staunton, a star rugby player in the three-quarter position and sole heir of the wealthy nobleman Lord Mount James, who has disappeared from his hotel room on the eve of a vital game with rival Oxford. Holmes may not be a great follower of sport, but he has found the circumstances of Staunton's disappearance interesting enough to merit an investigation. As we rejoin the story in part 3, Sherlock Holmes brings his investigation to the telegraph office from which Staunton sent a panicked message to an unknown recipient immediately before his disappearance. A message that ended with the words, "Stand by us for God's sake." The telegraph office was a short distance from the hotel. We halted outside it.
It's worth trying, Watson. Of course, with a warrant, we could demand to see the counterfoils, but we have not reached that stage yet. I don't suppose they remember faces in so busy a place. Let us try it.
Holmes walked boldly into the office and spoke in his blandest manner to the young man behind the counter.
I'm sorry to trouble you, but there must have been some small mistake about a telegram I sent yesterday. I've had no answer, and I very much fear that I must have omitted to put my name at the end. Could you tell me if this was so?
The young man turned over a sheaf of message slips.
What time was it?
A little after 6.
Whom was it to?
Holmes put his finger to his lips and glanced at me, then whispered confidentially.
The last words in it were, "For God's sake." I am very anxious at getting no answer.
The young man separated one of the forms and smoothed it out upon the counter.
This is it. There is no name.
Oh, then that of course accounts for my getting no answer. Dear me, how very stupid of me, to be sure. Good morning, sir, and many thanks for having relieved my mind.
He chuckled and rubbed his hands when we found ourselves in the street once more. Well?
We progress, my dear Watson, we progress. I had 7 different schemes for getting a glimpse at that telegram, but I could hardly hope to succeed the very first time.
And what have you gained?
A starting point for our investigation.
He hailed a cab.
To King's Cross Station.
We have a journey then?
Yes, I think we must run down to Cambridge together. All the indications seem to me to point in that direction.
Tell me, have you any suspicion yet as to the cause of the disappearance? I don't think that among all our cases I have known one where the motives are more obscure. Surely you don't really imagine that he may be kidnapped in order to give information against his wealthy uncle?
Well, I confess, my dear Watson, that does not appeal to me as a very probable explanation. It struck me, however, as being the one that was most likely to interest that exceedingly unpleasant Lord Mount James.
It certainly did that, but what are your alternatives?
I could mention several. You must admit that it is curious and suggestive that this incident should occur on the eve of this important match, and should involve the only man whose presence seems essential to the success of the side. It may, of course, be a coincidence, but it is interesting. Amateur sport is free from betting, but a good deal of outside betting goes on among the public, and it is possible that it might be worth someone's while to get at a player as the ruffians of the turf get at a racehorse. There's one explanation. A second very obvious one is that this young man really is the heir of a great property. However modest his means may at present be, and it is not impossible that a plot to hold him for ransom might be concocted.
These theories take no account of the telegram.
Quite true, Watson. The telegram still remains the only solid thing with which we have to deal, and we must not permit our attention to wander away from it. It is to gain light upon the purpose of this telegram that we are now upon our way to Cambridge. The path of our investigation is at present obscure, but I shall be very much surprised if before evening we have not cleared it up or made a considerable advance along it.
It was already dark when we reached the old university city. Holmes took a cab at the station and ordered the man to drive to the house of Dr. Leslie Armstrong. A few minutes later, we had stopped at a large mansion in the busiest thoroughfare. We were shown in, and, after a long wait, were at last admitted into the consulting room, where we found the doctor seated behind his table. It argues the degree in which I had lost touch with my profession, that the name of Leslie Armstrong was unknown to me. Now I am aware that he is not only one of the heads of the medical school of the university, but a thinker of European reputation in more than one branch of science. Yet, even without knowing his brilliant record, one could not fail to be impressed by a mere glance at the man. The square, massive face, the brooding eyes under the thatched brows, and the granite molding of the inflexible jaw. A man of deep character, a man with an alert mind, grim, aesthetic, self-contained, formidable. So I read Dr. Leslie Armstrong. He held my friend's card in his hand, and he looked up with no very pleased expression upon his dour features.
I've heard your name, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, and I'm aware of your profession, one of which I by no means approve.
In that, Doctor, you will find yourself in agreement with every criminal in the country.
So far as your efforts are directed towards the suppression of crime, sir, they must have the support of every reasonable member of the community, though I cannot doubt that the official machinery is amply sufficient for the purpose. Where your calling is more open to criticism is when you pry into the secrets of private individuals, when you rake up family matters which are better hidden, and when you incidentally waste the time of the men who are more busy than yourself. At the present moment, for example, I should be writing a treatise instead of conversing with you.
No doubt, Doctor, and yet the conversation may prove to be more important than the treatise. Incidentally, I may tell you that we are doing the reverse of what you very justly blame, and that we are endeavoring to prevent anything like public exposure of private matters, which must necessarily follow when once the case is fairly in the hands of the official police. You may look upon me simply as an irregular pioneer who goes in front of the regular forces of the country. I have come to ask you about Mr. Godfrey Staunton.
What about him?
You know him, do you not?
He is an intimate friend of mine.
You are aware that he has disappeared.
There was no change of expression in the rugged features of the doctor.
Ah, indeed.
He left his hotel last night and has not been heard of.
No doubt he will return.
Tomorrow is the varsity football match.
I have no sympathy with these childish games. The young man's fate interests me deeply since I know him and I like him. The football match does not come within my horizon at all.
I claim your sympathy, then, in my investigation of Mr. Staunton's fate. Do you know where he is?
Certainly not.
You have not seen him since yesterday?
No, I have not.
Was Mr. Staunton a healthy man?
Absolutely.
Did you ever know him ill?
Never.
Holmes popped a sheet of paper before the doctor's eyes.
Then perhaps you will explain this receipted bill for 13 guineas paid by Mr. Godfrey Staunton last week to Dr. Leslie Armstrong of Cambridge. I picked it out from among the papers upon his desk.
The doctor flushed with anger.
I do not feel that there is any reason why I should render an explanation to you, Mr. Holmes.
Holmes replaced the bill in his notebook.
If you prefer a public explanation, it must come out sooner or later. I have already told you that I can hush up that which others will be bound to publish, and you would be really wiser to take me into your complete confidence.
I know nothing about it.
Did you hear from Mr. Staunton in London?
Certainly not.
Dear me, the post office again. A most urgent telegram was dispatched to you from London by Godfrey Staunton at 6:15 yesterday evening, a telegram which is undoubtedly associated with his disappearance, and yet you have not had it. It is most culpable. I shall certainly go down to the post office here and register a complaint.
Dr. Leslie Armstrong sprang up from behind his desk, and his dark face was crimson with fury.
I'll trouble you to walk out of my house, sir. You can tell your employer, Lord Mount James, that I do not wish to have anything to do either with him or with his agents. No, sir, not another word.
He rang the bell furiously.
John, show these gentlemen out.
A pompous butler ushered us severely to the door, and we found ourselves in the street. Holmes burst out laughing.
Dr. Leslie Armstrong is certainly a man of energy and character. I have not seen a man who, if he turned his talents that way, was more calculated to fill the gap left by the illustrious Moriarty. And now, my poor Watson, here we are, stranded and friendless in this inhospitable town, which we cannot leave without abandoning our case. This little inn just opposite Armstrong's house is singularly adapted to our needs. If you would engage a front room and purchase the necessaries for the night, I may have time to make a few inquiries.
It's clear that the doctor knows a good deal about the missing athlete, but how will Sherlock Holmes be able to outsmart such a worthy opponent and establish Staunton's location for himself? Find out tomorrow evening here on BeFM Drama in Part 4 of The Missing Three-Quarter.